moment to start, and I hope that more people come in than go out, actually, because there are really cool things to listen to. So my name is Rana Adib. I'm the Executive Secretary of REN21. I have met some of you already, and to start with, I would definitely first thank CEEW, and in particular Arunaba and Kanika to be here, but congratulate them for the launch of the Center for Energy Finance, which I think is a very good news for the global community. Now, I will not speak about the outlook, but about the status, the Renewables Global Status Report, which REN21 is producing actually every year. Before coming to content, I quickly explain you who we are. So REN21 is the policy network which brings together players from governments, intergovernmental organizations, industry associations, NGOs, and research and academia. It's really a community of many international players working together to advance the sustainable energy future with renewable energy. And when I'm saying with renewable energy, this renewable energy transition is building on two pillars: energy efficiency and renewable energy. Now, what we are doing is provide or create a lot of knowledge, and I think Kanika's presentation on the center was echoing very much the values we have at REN21. It's data, transparent data, owned data by many, to inform decision-making, but also to make the way we think about renewable energy evolve, and also allow to bridge basically the renewable energy sector to energy-consuming sectors, so getting out of our silos, bridging between different types of players. We're producing the Renewables Global States Report since 2005 every year, and we're also working on a new series, the Renewables in Cities Global States Report, doing some regional states report. So this is a tracking of what is ongoing. The other part is we're working on a series which is a Global Futures Report, and here we're really addressing, I guess, perceptual challenges to the energy transition. Because globally we still see that many issues are out there, many wrong thinking and beliefs are out there which hinder the development of renewable energy and the transition. When we're doing this, it's not because we're a data cruncher and we love it so much. We do love it a bit. But it is really to influence the energy debate and to make our thinking evolve, normative thinking evolve. This is fundamental when you are moving from 100 years fossil fuel and nuclear-based ecosystem to something which is new. And that's something we're doing for the community with the REN21 Academy, but also in a report in a conference series, which is the International Renewable Energy Conferences. And the next one's going to happen in Korea. And in 2010, we were very happy actually to have the IREC here in India. So it's kind of coming back after 9 years. Now, what is a report? The Renewables Global States Report is looking really at what is ongoing in renewable energy worldwide. And we started doing this because renewable energy in 2005 was not visible. It was about making renewable energy visible because in energy statistics, nothing was appearing, a part of hydropower. And in this similar logic, we're also looking, for instance, in renewable for energy access and push this. We are now pushing this much more into energy sectors, heating and cooling. So we're looking at all renewable energy technologies. We're looking at all end-use sectors, bridging renewable and efficiency, energy access, and obviously also everything which we heard about before, so EVs, everything which is enabling technologies. 2018, another strong year for renewable energy. And I'm going to move here so that I better see the slides. It is another strong year, and I think that's a very important message which we need to keep in mind. Renewable energy today is here to stay for many, many reasons. The total global capacity rose by 8% in 2018 and reached 246 gigawatts of installed capacities in the power sector. What is really interesting is solar PV for the first time surpassed 100 gigawatts, and there was an addition of 181 gigawatt of renewable power energy added. So this is a mainstream technology. When we're talking about conventional fuels and conventional energy from now on, this is not referring to fossil fuel and nuclear anymore. This is referring to sustainable energy building on renewables and energy efficiency. Let's come to India. I will not go into details so much. Obviously, there are some top countries. Here you see highlighted where India is appearing in the top 5 countries. And we have heard it. India has been very, very active in driving renewable energy uptake. Now, why am I a bit cautious? And the next slide is going to show this. Even though there are major opportunities in driving renewable energy, investment in 2018 went down by 11%. And here in India, they went down by 16%. Why is this critical? You could say, like, it's not critical because basically for $1 spent, you have more installed capacities, and that's something which is reflected here. And this is certainly true and is a positive trend. However, we do see globally that there is an impact of policy reviews in China, which have reduced significantly the installed capacities here in one leading country. Again, to this negative message, there is a positive one, which is even though China as a 60% country was going down significantly, the investment did not go down as much. And this is because today renewable energy is not a matter of pioneering countries anymore. There is 70 countries, 90 countries, I think, that have 1 gigawatt of installed capacities, more than 10 countries which have 10 gigawatt of installed capacities. So it's a global trend. And why is this still critical? It does just not take into account the urgency of climate change. And the urgency of climate change is not only about mitigation, it's also about developing energy infrastructures which are going to drive the economies of tomorrow in a resilient way. That's fundamental. And I think this is really something which is important for us to keep in mind, that we need to build up this fuel of our economies and this fuel of our societies. So we're not there yet, and we need much more investment going into this section. Let's come back to the nice part of the story, which is the power sector. So in the power sector, renewable energy represents 26.2% of the electricity demand. And for the first time, there was more electricity from solar PV only than from biopower. That's something which is really interesting. And we also see that when we're looking into the net installed capacities, for the 5th year, consecutive year, there is more capacities in renewable power than in conventional fuel. That is just an indicator that today it is a least cost option. So cost is really driving this development. Renewable power represents 30% of the installed capacities, over 30%. And I'm just showing these figures, not to go into detail here, but just to show you the exponential development we're looking at, which is really promising for the future too. So just think in terms of what are the myths out there and our beliefs, we should never underestimate what innovation, market technology can bring in the future if we put all will, I guess, into the direction. So here we have the solar PV capacity additions, which marked the 100 gigawatt in 2018, and wind power capacities, which continues to increase steadily. Since 5 years, 50 gigawatts. What is also interesting, when we're looking into these sectors, we do see that, for instance, floating solar and offshore wind are really technologies which are building up. So here we also have a lot of innovation. And what is really important, and we heard about this today, curtailment, integration of variable renewable electricity into our grids. A couple of years ago, also in very interconnected countries, the transmission system operator were very critical about integrating high shares of variable renewable electricity to their grids. And today, in 2018, we do have 9 countries which have more than 20% of variable renewables in their grids. We also have countries like Denmark which have almost 60% of variable renewables in their grids. So it is possible because innovation, market mechanism allow for doing this. And you see that, again, here we have kind of an exponential growth over the last years. So let's be really optimistic about what's happening here. So after this great news, I will, however, still say even though there is a major opportunity with renewable power, which is the least cost option, we still see many countries investing in new capacities, coal-fired power plants, natural gas plants, and discussing nuclear as a solution. And that's actually something which is not really taking into account also economic opportunities which we have building on renewable electricity. I come to the other part, which I think is extremely critical. Power only represents 17% of the total final energy demand. 17%. Heating and cooling is 51%. And especially when we are considering climate change and also the developments of economies in Asia, for instance, this is a demand which is rising at a huge pace. Transport is 32%. And here we only have 10% of renewable share and 3.3%. In the transport sector, it has increased a bit. In the heating and cooling sector, it's stable since a long time. And this is a major concern. And when you think about the last days, we did speak about energy access. We also spoke about cooking, etc. We're going to many conferences globally, nationally, in regions. In 90% of the cases, we end up having a discussion on the electricity market, which is 17% of our problem. So let's make this evolve. When we're looking into the heating and cooling market, and we heard about cities and their role basically in the transport transition, in particular when we speak about road transport, very clearly here, there are heating and cooling is appearing in two sectors. Building, 50% more or less globally, and 50% in industries. So in the part which is on buildings, we do see that indeed we're talking about very local markets here. It's not big utilities, it's not TSOs, national ones, global players, etc. But we have local providers here. And one of the questions we clearly pose at REN21 is, do we have the right data? And basically all international organizations working on renewable energy data are in agreement that we need to improve the data situation on the heating and cooling markets. So for this reason, REN21 is working now on this new report series, the Renewables in Cities Global Status Report, but also because we do see that there is a lot of ambition from the cities to drive the renewable energy transition. When it comes to the transport sector, moving actually transport ahead and renewable energy into the transport sector does not only have a climate change role, it's a matter of air pollution very often. According to WHO, there are 7 million deaths every year because of air pollution. And that's in-house air pollution, but it's also the air pollution we have in the cities. So driving this here is obviously, it is e-mobility, it is optimization, it's developing public transportation, etc. But if we are very serious about the decarbonization of the transport sector, about air pollution in the transport sector, we also need to replace the fuel by a renewable fuel. We do see trends here. Today, the highest share of renewable energy or the contribution is biofuel, and we heard this morning about Brazil, for instance. Biofuel production increased in 2018 by 7%. It is very much concentrated by two producing countries, 70% almost by the US and Brazil. So that's also something to take into account. There are opportunities to make this much more global. India is today the 6th largest ethanol producer, and that's an increase from 70%. And here again, we do see how policy is driving this approach, basically. We also see biomethane and advanced biofuels, because advanced biofuels, what does this mean? It is building, for instance, on the renewable electricity, which is today cost competitive, and develop, as Thierry has mentioned yesterday, for instance, hydrogen, so hydrogen fuels, synthetic fuels, which can not only be used in road transportation, where we rather see an electrification, but also in long haul and shipping. And here there is major developments ongoing. The other trend we see, and you heard about it, is the electric passenger or the e-mobility part. 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers. Very important trend. Very interesting when we're looking into local emissions because it brings down, compared to combustion engine, the emissions by almost 60%. Now, positive trend and an increase of 68% from one year to the other, 2017 to 2018, but just 2% of the car sales globally, concentrated in 20 cities and in a few countries. So we are far away today from a natural transition which is happening here, and policy is very important to use targets to make this transition happen. What is also important, and we heard about this only a bit, today the electricity used in electric vehicles is only a quarter of it is renewable power. If we are really serious about the e-mobility transition, it also means that in the planning process, we cannot have the e-mobility transition without planning additional renewable power resources. Because otherwise, an EV which is fueled by coal-fired electricity or nuclear electricity, etc., is not sustainable. So clearly, a very, very strong message is we need to have a much stronger integration of the different sectors. Now, why do we have this disconnect between the power sector and the other sectors? This is very clearly policy attention, policy and regulatory frameworks. 135 countries do have policies on renewable energy power, and you see that there is a steady increase over the last, since 2005, since we started tracking this. Only 70 countries have a renewable energy policies in the transport sector, most of them biofuel. Only 20 countries have a heat policy. When we're looking into cooling, this is a topic which is rising. I think India is the first country which has a cooling plan, a national cooling plan. That's really a sector which needs a major attention because it is fundamental, and it's also fundamental in driving socioeconomic, so social benefits, socioeconomic benefits, but also very important in the climate change discussion. What is the learning from here is if there is a policy attention, if there is a vision, and this was a case in power, there were some pioneering countries which decided to take the risk on some technologies, develop, however, an industry, a renewable power industry, create jobs around it, did have pilot demonstration projects which grew up with a 100,000 rooftop program, for instance, in Germany. This has triggered a global development which then allowed, with innovation, to drive down costs and really make the transition globally. So if we are serious about the other energy sectors, we need to replicate this, but much, much more quickly, and probably with also some shared responsibilities and risk management here. That's just, so for instance, the Hydrogen Alliance, where apparently some European countries are coming together, is something which is an interesting move because it will allow to address what is happening in renewable in industry and also in some of the transport sectors. We also see that policy attention then drives our way we think about what is possible in the future. These are the renewable energy targets. On the lower part, in blue, you have the renewable power targets. Everything which is on the left side is more ambitious, and everything higher is more ambitious. This is basically the renewable power shares. You see that much more countries have defined a renewable power target. So this is, we heard about the horizon. So here the horizon of what is happening in the sector is defined. And this is something fundamental if we are serious about involving investment or attracting investment and industrial development, but also fundamental in getting the energy consumers on board of this transition. When we're looking into heating and cooling, on the left side, you see there are some countries, luckily there are, but they are not very ambitious. And on transport, it's even worse. Now, what is the message here? I really invite everybody in the future to think carefully when you're talking about energy, whether you speak about energy or electricity. Because this is something which is mixed up regularly. Even in data, we are seeing data collection databases, there is not a very good understanding of the fact that these are two different things, and that if we're serious about the transition, we need to drive this and have a better understanding of what is really ongoing. Now, since I think we heard about the elephant in the room, I have not heard yet speaking about the elephant in the room, which is fossil fuel subsidies. And this is just a reality today. 115 countries have fossil fuel subsidies. 300 billion US dollars in 2017, and increased by over 30% to $400 billion in 2019. That's a reality. Sorry, this was from 2017 to 2018. And that's a reality, which just means, like, even though we are talking about a cost-competitive solutions, they are not operating level playing field. So if we are serious about what we aim for in the transition, it also means that we broaden our policy strategies here, and we have a clear discussion about how we are transforming these subsidies into something which is supporting the fuel of tomorrow. Another aspect, the International Monetary Fund has assessed the externalities of these fossil fuel subsidies and amounted it to 5 trillion US dollars per year. Assessments to reach Paris Agreement are 2 trillion US dollars per year. So let's be honest. We heard you need to have the knowledge and then address this knowledge. The numbers are there. We need to change our way we think about this and integrate it in our current decisions. I would quickly like to show 2 slides on energy access because I think that's something which is really important here. So we do see obviously the role of renewable energy in electricity access. Renewable energy also plays a role when we're speaking about clean cooking. And I think this is something which is also important. Again, when we spoke about energy access, we spoke very much about electricity again. The cooking sector is also super important, and I think in India, for instance, most of the population has access to electricity, but there is still something over 50% of the population which does not have access to clean cooking. And this is health issues. This will create cost for societies. Off-grid solar PV is increasingly widespread. 150 million people across Africa and Asia benefit from the energy access. We had many discussions about how to create jobs, and here it's very clear. We need to see that the future of the electricity will also move from basic electricity supply to something which will be a higher quality electricity supply. But again, it is necessary to broaden this and say, like, what does this electricity we bring create as socioeconomic opportunities? And when we're speaking about skill developments, workforce developments, etc., business developments, opportunities for economic activities, broaden it and go beyond the productive use, which is the solar water pump and the mill. Please don't understand me wrongly. These are very important. They are very important. But there are much broader opportunities. And again, this means, like, we need to really see energy not only as a vertical part, but something which is fueling all our economic activities. Clean cooking, 125 million people use biogas for cooking, and I think here in India, again, this is something which is taken into account in the biogas program. And also allows major opportunities to link basically the agriculture sector to the energy sector. I'm coming to the ending slide. There are real opportunities because there are change agents and there are signals which show that they are moving into the direction to develop renewable energy. There is leadership from national governments. We do see governments divesting from fossil fuel, defining 100% renewable power targets, etc. There are cities and subnational governments which are very proactive and have often even targets which are more ambitious than the national governments. So here is a real opportunity to develop a multi-level governance which is strong and supporting the energy transition at all levels. And also there is more than 1,000 organizations which total US dollars of 8 trillion of managed assets which have decided to divest from fossil fuel. This is something which will ripple down also in economies which might not yet have themselves engaged into the renewable energy transition, because these players are also coming from private sectors and they will go down the whole supply chain and come down to manufacturers in exporting countries, for instance. So there is major opportunities here, and there is also a need to adapt to these trends. And the private sector has, for instance, doubled its investment in sourcing renewable power. Now, all this is great. What is fundamental is that we have the right policy and regulative framework to drive this, and that there is ambitious objectives on where we are heading to so that these players also engage into this. And this means all sectors, integrating them together, addressing fossil fuel subsidies, and also addressing in a structural way what energy means for our economies and what it also means to transition from a fossil fuels-based society and economy to a renewable-based society and economy. With this, I'm ending. You will have the summaries here, but I invite you to see the full report online because it's 300 pages and we didn't bring them. It was a bit heavy. Thank you very much.